Welcome to Online EdVantage. I'm Dr. Jody Richardson Delgado. Today we're going to be talking about social psychology. Some of the reasons that students take Psychology 101 is because they want to know why people do what they do. And one of the explanations for that is attributions. Attributions explain the cause of behaviors and events. There's external or environmental causes, and there's also internal causes. Oftentimes with environmental causes, it's the situation that the person is in that really kind of impacts their behavior. With internal causes, those are going to be things like emotions, personality characteristics, and those also influence our behavior in different situations. Now, there's something that can happen with making attributions, and it's called the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error happens when we attribute people's behavior to an internal or dispositional cause rather than an external or situational factor that we may or may not know about. Oftentimes we want to jump to the reason very quickly, and we don't know all the situations that the person is in. Therefore, we think it could be or probably is an internal or dispositional characteristic. So the example that you see on this slide here is after Hurricane Katrina. After Hurricane Katrina, parts of the Gulf of Mexico were flooded, and many people were not able to evacuate. And often people were saying that these people were silly not to evacuate. Why would they put themselves in danger? So being silly, a dispositional attribution, rather than looking at the situational factors, there were not enough buses to actually get people out of their dangerous situation. So transportation was an issue at that time. But that wasn't necessarily something that everyone knew about because the media hadn't gotten that information out to everyone yet. So this is an example of the fundamental attribution error, when we jump to an internal cause rather than looking at what is in the situation for the person or the people that are dealing with their issues. This is related to a just world phenomenon, false consensus, and saliency bias. Now, just world phenomenon is we want to live in a just world. We want to believe that people get what they deserve. So this is where we think that someone's actions or something within them has caused this situation and their behavior that they're in. False consensus is the idea that I know what I would do in that situation, so others would do the same as me or should do the same as me, this false consensus. That's not always the case, especially when we don't know the full situation. And then there's the saliency bias, and that's where we look at the most salient characteristic of the situation. Whatever captures the attention first is what we focus on, rather than pausing and actually looking into the situation to find out what was actually happening at that time. The opposite is true when we start to think about ourself and some of the issues that we have in ourself. This is called the self-serving bias. And this is where we take credit for our successes and we externalize our failures. So our successes are due to an internal characteristic and our failures are due to an environmental or external situation. So the example that you see on the slide here is the test that I got an A on and the test that I didn't do so well on. I got an F. Well, I got that A because I'm so smart and I'm so well prepared for that test, self-serving bias. I didn't do well on the test, so the test that I didn't do well on, the F, I didn't do well because of external factors. The teacher made that test too hard. Some external factor was the reason I didn't do well. It wasn't the fact that maybe I wasn't prepared for the test. Something that we found with the fundamental attribution error is that it's culturally based. We find that the fundamental attribution error is more likely to happen in individualistic cultures than it is in collectivist cultures. And this is because in collectivist cultures, the focus is often more on the situation that surrounds the individual rather than the individual themselves in that situation. Attitude is another thing that we look at when we want to explain someone's behavior. So the three components of attitude are cognitive, affective or emotional, and behavioral. These three, when they line up, they are congruent and we have a complete attitude. So The example that you see in this slide here is a little piggy bank with money. So if my attitude is I don't want to be in debt, cognitively I'm thinking about not being in debt and I'm making plans not to be in debt. Effectively, when my bank account is low or when I see that I actually owe someone money, I might start to feel a little anxious or feel a little nervous about that. And once that debt is paid off, I feel emotionally better. That anxiety goes away. Behaviorally, you can watch someone as they are actually paying off their debts or keeping themselves out of debt. And when these three align, as I was saying previously, this is when we have congruence. When one of these components doesn't align, that's when we have incongruence. And this is a way to actually change behavior and change attitude. This was found in a study on cognitive dissonance. It's an unpleasant tension and anxiety that's caused by a discrepancy between our attitude and our behavior. So that behavior component isn't matching with our cognition and our emotion. Festinger and Carl Smith actually found this in a study that was done in 1959. They paid one group of individuals to do a very boring task, and they knew that this was a boring task. They paid them $1. And so they went in and they did this boring task. They paid them $1. And the part of the study that they were most interested in was they told these individuals, please go out and tell the group how interesting and fun this experiment was. Well, it was boring. They didn't like it. They were only paid $1. So they kind of had to make a big shift in their attitude in order to really be able to participate and say, yes, this was a fun activity. Now in group 2, those individuals, again, the same task, boring, they didn't really like it, but they were excited because the experiment itself, they were actually getting compensated for what they were doing. Thanks for watching. Please click on the Online EdVantage logo to subscribe.